If you haven't heard about Anchor, it's the easiest way to make a podcast. Let me explain. It's free. There's creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. Anchor will distribute your podcast for you so it can be heard in Spotify, Apple Podcast, and many more. You can make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. It's everything you need to make a podcast in one place.
Alright everybody, and welcome back to the Pro Wrestle Zone podcast. As always, this is Dan. I know it's been a while, it's been about a week or so, but we're back here kicking ass. This is Dan, like I said, or Dan the Beast 94 on YouTube. Check me out. And joining me in here this evening, former ROH and TNA superstar, Jimmy Rave. Man, what the fuck's going on, man? How you doing?
Just living life for now, man.
I hear you. Listen, I know with the whole COVID situation and everything, first of all, how have you been adjusting with life? But not only with that, but I know recently, a couple months ago, you recently just had your left arm amputated. What caused that injury to get infected? Was it just something that you just held off for a recent amount of time, or was it just like nagging injuries that you just never got bothered to get checked out with?
No, that was kind of it. Like I was working in the yard and I got a cut and it was just red for months, you know what I mean? Like, right. And I just put topical ointments on it and then it got real bad and like really painful. And then finally I went to the hospital. Like I had seen some people online say that I refused to get surgery or something like that, which was never the case, you know what I mean? Like I didn't know anything was really going wrong. So then, yeah, I went there. They were like, "Oh, this is too bad," and it was like right at my elbow.
Okay,
you know what I mean? So like, so it was just too much of the muscle had deteriorated underneath the skin, and so they're like, "Yo, we gotta take this because if we did like skin grafts, it would take years for you to go through all that, you know?"
So throughout that whole duration, was there any chances of possibly saving your arm, but, you know, just going through the chances of just taking some strong antibiotics or?
They put me right on antibiotics and, you know, like, cause they were afraid the infection got in my bloodstream. So they were trying to keep it from getting to my heart. And so it was just too bad of an infection by then. So, we talked about it, and I didn't want to be going through surgeries for like 5 years, you know, like getting skin grafts and stuff. Because the doctors was telling me like it was super painful, and so yeah, he was just like, you know, I spoke to a surgeon, an orthopedic guy, a vascular surgeon. And they were all like, this was probably going to be the best bet. So I just listened to what they said.
Now, during that duration of time last year, did you happen to wrestle at all anytime last year? And was there any signs of like oh, you know, like my arm's kind of getting messed up here? So
no, there wasn't any signs. I wrestled, I think the last show I did was in December. Was Cage of Death for CZW, and I was fine. Everything seemed fine. I mean, it was still aching, you know what I mean? But like, it wasn't a hindrance or anything like that.
Right. Now, going through this thought process, you know, a lot of people would think, hey, your career's over. Even yourself would sit there and say, hey, my career's over. I'm fucked. You know, I can't do this anymore. I have to retire. But I mean, not saying, I mean, hopefully maybe there's a chance, but, you know, you got to really look at guys back in the day. Like, you know, I'm sure you remember Zach Gowen when he came to WWE and he had the one leg and the amputated leg. And he had, you know, the peg leg and everything. maybe not wrestling, but have you ever considered that role of maybe possibly going through like the process of becoming a manager?
Um, well, I know. So like Zach and I have been friends. Like I was there his first night at TNA. I actually spoke to Zach before I released my statement. He was the first person I called. And so like this last. So in 2010, 2011, I started writing TV in Georgia. Like I was producing and writing TV and still wrestling on the shows. So the last like 10 years, I've been doing a lot of backstage stuff, like agenting, producing. Um, like I've been running the CZW training school for the last almost 2 years now. So I've been trying to position myself towards that because I'm coming up. This was 21 years for me. This past October, it's been a long time. But I'm relatively healthy. Like I don't have any, like my knees are fine. Like I don't have anything nagging injuries. So my hopes is to try to land somewhere and get like a backstage role somewhere.
You know what? That'd be cool too. And with the new promotion like AEW up and running, that's been going on for at least a year or so now. That would definitely be a good opportunity. Would there ever be any considerations of maybe possibly going to like the Performance Center if WWE gave you that offer? Because I know back in 2005 you did a couple matches for Sunday Night Heat. One that in particular stands out was the one with like you and Chris Masters. You mind talking about what was it like backstage? I know a lot of people go through like the backstage politics, but what was the atmosphere like with WWE as compared or different to your time with like CZW, Ring of Honor, TNA?
Well, 2005 was just a different animal. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like right now, I mean, I'm very close with Sanjay Dutt. Abyss and I are good friends. Steve Carino and I are good friends, and like they're all, producers there. So, but like when in 2005, it was a different animal. Like they wanted you to be 6 foot, 220 pounds. You know what I mean? And I was just never built like that. I was always around 185, 190. But like they offered me a deal right before I went to TNA. They wanted me to go to developmental, and when they had Deep South, but they offered me $500 a week, and I was making $500 a night on the indies. You know what I mean? So it just wasn't feasible at that time. And plus, I wasn't big enough. Like they would have cut me. You know what I mean? Like I wouldn't have been there for a long time. But like
Right.
like starting around 2006 when like Punk and Daniel Bryan got there, like that kind of changed the atmosphere.
Right. And I mean, you really got to consider it too. I mean, I don't think necessarily you would have been cut off, but like SmackDown, they had their cruiserweight division at the time. And I mean, I understand where you're coming from because back in the 2000s, by the time 2001 was gone, 2002 and the rest of the years were going through, it was practically a dark time because the only promotions that were up at that time were WWE and, you had TNA and Ring of Honor that was practically just, starting off, trying to blossom, trying to, bang on WWE's door like, hey, look at us.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean, backtracking a little bit, let's get started from, you were born in Atlanta.
I
I
was
could,
actually born in Kentucky. I was a military kid. I lived in Alaska, Hawaii, Washington State, but then when my stepfather retired, we ended up in Marietta, Georgia.
okay. So growing up in Atlanta, I mean, I can only assume that you were heavily, consumed with like WCW as, WCW was more of like a mid-South territory.
Yeah, well, I mean, like I didn't start watching WCW until I got to Atlanta, actually. And that was when I was like 13, 14. But the crazy story that I have is like like baseball was supposed to be my meal ticket, you know what I mean? Like that's what I was really good at. And I went to baseball practice maybe like 2 weeks after we had moved here. And like I was at the concession stand and I turned the corner and Dusty Rhodes was standing right there and I was like, what the hell? You know, and Cody he's a few years younger than me. His sister and I are the same age. But Dusty was there coaching Cody for baseball. And like I went to rival high schools. Like I went to Sprayberry, like Buff Bagwell came out of my school. And then Xavier Woods later on was from Spreaker High School too. He was the same age as Cody, but yeah. So that's when I kind of got the bug to start training, and like within a year, I started training. I was, like 14, 15 when I started training and like running around on the indies.
Now, if wrestling didn't work out, was there any intentions of possibly you pursuing like a baseball career, possibly making it to like the MLB?
Yeah, like by the time I was a freshman, there was a good amount of schools that were like looking, that were talking to me. So, but then like I really had this epiphany, like, you're relying on a team of people, you know what I mean? Whereas like pro wrestling, if I don't succeed, it's on me, you know what I mean? It doesn't matter about who's behind me, So that's kind of what I wanted to do. I wanted to be in something that like, if I did, like if I worked hard, I can succeed at it. And it was just on me,
And you talked about, running into Dusty Rhodes. Did you happen to ever establish a relationship with Dusty or any of his kids?
Yeah, I ended up working for Dusty when he had Turnbuckle Championship Wrestling. By then, I was already at NWA Wildside, and so I started there right at the end of 2000, and we were a WCW developmental company. And then when WCW closed down, Dusty had a training school right down the road from where I lived, and Glacier was actually a middle school PE teacher of mine. You know what I mean? Like we just had like wrestlers running all over, and so yeah, I ended up wrestling for Dusty, and we had a good relationship.
Now, during your time with like NWA Wildside, I discovered that WCW was a developmental territory for that promotion. Was there any talks of maybe possibly you getting called up? Because I know around that time they had already called up guys like Elix Skipper and AJ Styles.
Yeah. Yeah, so like, Elix Skipper, like Mark Jindrak, O'Hara, all those guys, I saw all their first matches. They actually would go to the power plant during the day, and on Wednesday nights, there was this bar in Atlanta called Good Old Days, and that's where they had all their first matches, that's where they got fine-tuned. And then when Wildside got the developmental deal, they started wrestling with us, and we would have guys like Bob Ryder and Jeremy Borash, who ended up, working for TNA, but they were at WCW at the time. And like Terry Taylor was always there. Finley, guys like that would always be around. And like I never had, there was one incident that happened at when I was at Wildside, and I got an email from the WCW office, and it was they told me to stop taking unprotected chair shots. You know what I mean? Like because they were looking at me, but they were like, we don't want to have somebody on here that has a problem with concussions, But they came one night and I took a whole bunch of unprotected chair shots and yeah, like that was only my only run-in with them. But like they would call us to do extra work, and like this will tell you how they lost all their money. Like they would call us to do extra work, and we were getting $500 a night to do extra work or be security guards. And like WWE, if you're an extra there, it's like $200 right now, and like so like, and then if you got a match, it was another $1,000. You know what I mean? Like they would, they would pay really well. That's also how they lost like $200 million in a year.
Right. Now, was there anybody who was on like WCW's like booking or somebody who was in charge of like bringing guys up that took favor of your interest and was like, hey, we want to use you more?
Terry Taylor. You know what I mean? And like I think that was super helpful for me when I got to TNA.
Okay. Now, you debuted in 1999, and a lot of people may not know this, but you were actually under a mask at first. You were known as Mr. XTC. Was that your idea, or was that somebody's pitch that said, hey, we want you under a mask first before we feel comfortable with you being revealed and, being comfortable with your own identity?
Yeah, so that was there was a promoter called Don Lewis, and he had local TV in Atlanta, and I only was doing that gimmick for him, and it only lasted a few shows. But like I remember one time I was at his office, and he said, "Your face isn't marketable." You know what I mean? And like I remember when I got like my first like $10,000 check. I took a picture of it and I said, somebody thought it was marketable, and I sent it to him.
Okay. I mean, I know it was very, very short run, but whose decision was it for them to take the mask off you?
It was mine. Yeah, I was just like, I don't want to do this anymore, and I was. One of my first matches was against Jamie Noble.
Okay.
And I remember when I was wrestling him, I couldn't see anything in the mask. You know what I mean? Like it just made wrestling very difficult. And so, and like at the time, I was doing more risky moves, and so like I didn't want to, get hurt early on, but like. I like when I first came up, it was still kind of the wild, wild west. You know what I mean? Like you still have guys from the 80s and early 90s that had this mentality of, trying to get people out of the business. And I wrestled this guy like in one of my first handful of matches, and he broke my arm on purpose, and told me not to come back. And then, so like I was already having like problems like that, like early on.
Now, was there any initial thoughts like early on in your career where you were probably like, maybe this sport's not for me. Maybe I'd want to go back to pursuing baseball or maybe a different outtake?
No, I, like, anytime like adversity is put in my face, like I try to figure out a way to combat that with doing something positive. You know what I'm saying? Like, so that guy was very loyal to the guy I was talking about, Don Lewis. So then that's when I went to Wildside and like started my relationship with Bill Behrens, who ended up becoming my agent.
Okay. And I know during your time during NWA Wildside, twice, respectively, that you held the Wildside and the World Junior Heavyweight titles. Some of the matches that you had during your time were guys against like Caprice Coleman, Tony Mamaluke, Jason Cross. What was it like to be in the ring with those individuals who've had so much experience ahead of their time?
Yeah, so like my first match was on TV for them was with Caprice Coleman. Like we had a long feud, and like the first year at Wildside was just like me trying to, I had been wrestling Jason Cross on the other Outlaw shows before, so he was always a good person to wrestle. Like he would be a superstar right now if he stayed in wrestling. Like he was so acrobatic and good. He was just like AJ. He walked in and could do a shooting star press his first day of training. You know what I mean? Like those kind of guys. But like when Mamalu got there, that was super helpful for me because I got programmed with Mamaluke, and we ended up wrestling each other everywhere, CZW, Ring of Honor, everywhere. And he taught me how to be like a technical wrestler. And that ended up being something that was super helpful for me. And my relationship with him was like super good. And so he was the thing that helped me get out of Georgia. Like, because a lot of guys got stuck in Georgia. There's so many good guys that were at Wildside. Like Slim J was awesome. Like I said, Jason Cross. There were so many good guys that down there that never got a look. And Mama Luke wouldn't let me just sit around and be there. He took me on the road with him and everything. And he was a Malenko student, and I also wrestled Jeremy Lopez, who was another Malenko student. And those guys, being from Malenko school, and Jamie Noble was they were all the three guys from Malenko school that I ended up being friends with and wrestling a lot. And like they're, because Malenko's such a technical wrestler, it ended up helping me so much.
Now, you talked about Mama Luke. Let's talk about a little bit about ECW. Did you ever have a match inside the original ECW arena? Because a couple weeks back, I had Chris Harris on the show, and he had a match in 2001 against Mr. Perfect. Anywhere during your tenure in the Independence, did you have a chance or an opportunity to wrestle in the ECW arena?
All the time. When I started at CZW, we were the company that ran the ECW arena. And so, like, every month I was in the ECW arena from, like, 2002 until 2004, like, every month. And then when I was in Ring of Honor, we did our tapings at the arena, too. And then, CZW, when I first started working backstage there, we ran the ECW arena, like, 2 years ago. And so, yeah, I've gotten to be there a lot.
Okay. And you brought up AJ Styles a little bit earlier. Somebody that you had countless matches with, whether it was in Wildside, CZW, Ring of Honor, TNA. I know back in Ring of Honor, you had this thing where you were known to steal other people's finishing moves. Mm-hmm. You actually had a move called the Rave Clash, which was your style, your version of the Styles Clash. And then I'm not sure if this is true or not, but you also had another finisher after the whole stipulation match between you and AJ, which if one of you lost, you would have to stop using that move. Later on, you would end up getting a move called Greetings from Ghana, which was basically Triple H's pedigree, or your version of the pedigree, sort of say. Would you necessarily say that was kind of a shot, or maybe like, ringing a doorbell on WWE's door, like, hey, hello, Ring of Honor here, so check us out?
No, it was, what happened was like after I was coming up on losing the Styles Clash, like I knew that match was coming up, and I was like, man, what am I going to do for a finish? And then Ricky Steamboat cut a promo in Philadelphia, and he was putting over Triple H, just, talking about how knowledgeable he is, and everybody just went nuts and like started booing. And I was like, oh, well, now I know what my finish is going to be because I was a heel. And so I, like, anytime I could pick up on something like that, I'd grab it,
There you go.
It wasn't like a shot at him or nothing, like it was it was more just for my character, you know what I mean? Like it just made a lot of sense for what I was doing.
Now, was there anybody in the back at that time who ever pitched like a finish to you, like, hey, maybe you should start using this move more often?
No, like back in those days, like Ring of Honor was such a good place to be, and like nobody really, like everybody kind of got what everybody else was doing. You know what I'm saying? Like we were so in tune with the product because we were trying to push this product. You know what I mean? Like, when I went back to Ring of Honor in like 2011 or 2013, it wasn't the same thing. You know what I mean? Like there was this real vibe of everybody putting the company on their back, and we wanted it all to succeed. So everybody, like, when I am working as an agent, I'll give you an example. Like I watched AEW Dark this week, and they like Brian Cage. He did the power, like the multiple power bombs. You know what I mean? And then a few matches later, 10 from the Dark Order did the same kind of power bomb. You know what I mean? Picks the guy up the ground and slams him just like Brian did 2 matches ago. You know, so I'm very in tune with continuity, and so like whenever I am producing backstage, I try to tell people, hey, watch everything that's going on. And I learned that from Bryan Danielson. Like we would watch the whole show for multiple reasons. Like I didn't want to duplicate something that was already happening on the show, but I also wanted to figure out what kind of audience it was. You know what I mean? Like we really wrestled differently than when we were in New York City or Dayton, Ohio. You know what I mean? The fans were real different. And so that's something I've learned over the years of how to wrestle in front of different crowds.
Now, how was it like facing Bryan Danielson? Because I know sometime in Ring of Honor, at the 4th anniversary show, you end up getting an opportunity for the ROH World Title against Bryan Danielson. How was his style like back in the day compared to how he practically wrestles nowadays? And do you think he'll retire this year? I know he's on like a short-term contract. I know this is like the final, like after this contract, he's finished. Would you see him as like a good trainer for like the Performance Center or just an all-around performer?
Yeah, absolutely. He's got one of the best minds for wrestling. Like he's a genius, you know what I mean? Like that match was so we didn't get to put together the match because Jack Evans' flight was late, and we just went out there and wrestled. And we ended up wrestling for like 40 minutes, and it's one of my favorite matches, and I've wrestled him multiple times. But like it was like I kind of came up with the finish where he was doing the elbows at the time, and I was like, hey, do you mind if instead of me tapping out, if I pass out in it? And it was the first time we did that at Ring of Honor. And when I went to TNA and came back, he was like, I wrestled him in one of my first matches back, and he goes, keep in mind that you didn't lose to me. Like, you didn't tap out and you didn't get pinned. Like, so when we wrestled again, we did the same kind of finish. And so he was so mindful of what we would do. You know what I mean? He's a genius like that. And like, I don't think he would want to be a trainer. I think he would rather be like a producer or something like that. Just because he used to train at the Ring of Honor school. And like, we were riding partners for about 3 years in Ring of Honor. Like before I even wrestled him, like we were just always together. And, later on when I left the embassy and I was doing, the heel hook and the House of the Rising Sun, he was the one that, we were in his car one day and that song came on. He goes, "You need to use this song," and like, and then he showed me how to do the heel hook. Like, he was real influential in my career. And then later, when I was writing TV in Atlanta, and he got in trouble for choking Justin Roberts, like, I brought him into Atlanta TV, and he didn't charge me an arm and a leg. He gave me a fair price, like, and I knew what he was getting other places, you know. And so, you know, like, I just had a good relationship with him, and I just know how smart he is, and like, so wrestling him was always a breeze. And we tagged together a lot in Florida for FIP, and so, you know, like, he's real smart. Like, he's another person that, you know, if he needs to have like a Tokyo Dome style match, he can do it. But like, if he wants to do like funny type matches, he can do that too. You know what I mean? He's super entertaining guy. And so, you know, I know when right before he signed with WWE, he was talking about quitting. You know, he goes, I'm gonna go to Thailand and do Muay Thai for a year and not wrestle, and I think I'm done with it. And then he got the deal with WWE and like stuck around. So I know he has that, you know, that want to like kind of chill out. You know, I mean, like, we started the same month. You know, he started in October '99, and so did I. And so, you know, but you know, he's putting on a lot of work. You know what I mean?
Right. And you know, speaking about that whole Justin Roberts incident, during that time, I'm not sure if you had any conversation with him during that incident, but was there any time where he showed grief where it was like, you know, maybe I shouldn't have never done that? But at the same time, you know, we had Heath Slater on the show about a month ago, and he was just, you know, he was talking about like the whole incident on how Vince was just like, don't touch the cameras and, you know, just don't touch the fans. And that's it. There was no indication of like, hey, you know, you can't attack Justin Roberts, because he wasn't informed on that. Right. So during that time, was there any like consideration? Obviously, he got called back about like a month or two later when he returned at SummerSlam. But was there any consideration of possibly bringing him back to Ring of Honor? Was there any talks? Were you around at that time?
He knew he was going back right away, so like he wasn't worried about it. You know what I mean? Like, right. He did like that month of indies, and then went right back. You know what I mean? Like, and like he did a show for me. He did Pro Wrestling Guerrilla. He might have done one Ring of Honor show, but you know, like he knew he was going back, so he wasn't worried about it. You know.
Now, getting back to you, you debuted for Ring of Honor in 2003. You were known as the Crown Jewel of the Embassy. What was it like being under the wing of Prince Nana?
It was always interesting. Like, you know, I love Prince Nana. He's such a character. You know what I mean? But like, you know, when it came to the in-ring stuff, like, you know, it was mostly like, you know, who I was wrestling and my ideas, and Nana and I are still close, and you know, he's just a good dude.
Yeah. And I know further down the line, you know, during your time in Ring of Honor, you know, you were practically one of the top heels down there. And I know in 2006, back in that time, you know, fans were throwing streamers and everything. But during your time, you know, making your entrance, you know, making your well-known recognition, fans were throwing in toilet paper. Mm-hmm. And I guess there was an incident in 2006 where Ring of Honor stopped the use of having fans throwing in toilet paper because you almost tried to attack a fan. What was the story behind all that? Do you recall that story?
Yeah, and that was just a storyline. What actually happened was we were, you know, I would throw the toilet paper back at people, right? Like when they throw it to me, I'd throw it back. And then like when me and Alex Shelley and Abyss were around, they throw it back too. You know what I mean? And what happened was we were in England, and like they threw so much toilet paper, it was insane. And so I'm throwing it back, and then I just hear a bunch of booing. You know what I mean? And like when you're in the ring, you can't really see out there because of the lights, you know. And apparently, like I hit a little girl that was standing on a chair, and she fell off the chair. And like that's when they were like, "All right, we got to stop doing this." But like, you know, that was that was the only reason we did the fan thing to kind of give a reason to stop doing it. A few shows later.
Now you ended up leaving Ring of Honor in 2007. Mm-hmm. Was that because you had gotten offered a deal with TNA, or I know you did have some substance abuse with, not going to say because obviously this is your own private life, but obviously you had some problems with drugs during your time.
Yeah. So what ended up happening is I was wrestling Samoa Joe, and he kicked me in the jaw and broke my jaw. And I had just left my real job, you know what I mean? And so like wrestling is now my only source of income. And I had this big match with Nigel that we were going to do in England. And so I ended up wrestling with my jaw broken for 5 weeks, you know, and like every night, like somebody would hit me in the jaw and like it would just swell up. I mean, I used to have a picture, but my like jaw was like out to here, like it was bad. And so I ended up wrestling Nigel in England, and then that's where they started calling it the Jawbreaker Lariat because after that I had to get my jaw wired shut because it was so bad. And then I came back and wrestled a little bit more for them, but I like what was happening is they started offering guys contracts, right? And they were offering some guys medical insurance. And so they didn't offer that to me. And I was like, and like some of the guys that were getting it hadn't been there as long as I had been, you know what I mean?
Right.
And like they didn't want to give me a raise, and like the contract negotiations were real hard to deal with, you know? And so in the contracts, like when I wrestled for TNA, you have in the contract that they guarantee you days. They'll say, okay, we're going to guarantee you that we'll use you 26 times this year. You know, that's half the year. Okay. Well, Ring of Honor gave you no guarantee days. So they had you under contract, but didn't have to use you. You know what I mean? And so, then it becomes a problem or whatever. But what happened was I came back, I went to Japan, and I came back, and then they took me off 5 shows. And I was like, what the hell, dude? Like, well, also, I had back surgery when I was out with my jaw. But then when I came back, so I had an incident right before I broke my jaw, okay, where I was wrestling Colt Cabana and Ace Steel, and Ace Steel hit me with a cowbell, and it split my head open, right? Like 7 staples worth, okay? But I love Gabe Sapolsky, but at this night we had a big falling out. So I'm bleeding out, you know what I mean? Like all this blood's gushing out of my head. And like when at the time, like when you would work for Ring of Honor, and you flew into a city, they would have like one van for everybody that flew in, right? Well, that van was being used, and I'm bleeding out, and I need to go to the hospital. And I'm like, Gabe, what am I supposed to do? And he goes, hold on, I got to go watch this other match. And I'm like, what the fuck, man? Like, what am I supposed to do about this, you know?
Right.
And so and this is before Uber and everything else, you know what I mean? And so, like, I ended up finding somebody to take me to the hospital. They stapled it shut. Then I broke my jaw. And then I wrestled with it broken for 5 weeks. I cut the wires off to come back early, right? My second match back, BJ Whitmer gives me a power bomb into the turnbuckle. And then when I bounced off, we hit heads. So then I needed 7 stitches across my eye, right? Then I go to Japan, I come back, and I'm wrestling in this 4-way, and I wrestle Grant Akuma. He's one of the guys in it. And he forearms me in my ear and ruptures my eardrum, like to where I'm bleeding out my ear,
Oh. So
I go into the locker room, and I'm like, yo, can nobody talk to me? Just leave me alone, you know what I mean? Because now I know I have to go to the hospital, and I don't have any insurance, And then Gabe and Carrie Silken came into the room, and I kind of blew up on them and asked for my release. And then they gave it to me, and both parties should have cooled off, you know what I mean? But yeah, I mean, I was done, you know what I mean? Because I was just getting hurt so much, and that was my only source of income, and so it was just killing me, because I love the company, you know what I'm saying? It was my heart. Like, I'd been there, for a long time. And, but yeah, I quit. I ended up getting a call from my agent, who's Bill Behrens, and he was working for WWE at the time. And he was like, well, they want to sign you, so we want you to come to SmackDown and Raw in 2 weeks. And then I was like, all right, well, so I started getting ready for that, working out for that. And then I get another call from Bill about a week later. And he goes, I was in California for Pro Wrestling Guerrilla. And he goes, TNA wants to offer you a deal. They'll start you this weekend. You know what I mean? And what they were offering me was more than WWE was going to give me in a week. You know what I'm saying? And
right.
So I ended up just taking that offer.
Now, do you know officially, who called Bill and was like, hey, we were interested in having you come to WWE?
Yeah, so a couple of years before this, I had done an independent show all these independents were booking me and AJ Styles against each other. And this particular one booked me and AJ Styles and had Vince Russo in his corner as his manager, right? Well, on the plane, I ended up sitting next to Vince Russo. And he didn't remember me from all the times I'd been at doing stuff for when they were doing the Wednesday night pay-per-views, right? And so, he just didn't pay attention to, the guys that weren't signed, you know what I mean? And so he watched my match that night, and on the way back, he was like, I want to do something with you. I want to do something with you. I was like, all right, cool, And then he got fired that week, right? And then he started running these religious shows, and I ended up helping him with those shows, And then he got his job back at TNA. And then when I was in Japan, he was emailing me. He was like, I've got an idea for you. They wanted me to come in and be part of VKM with Road Dogg and Billy Gunn. Wow. And I was gonna be more in like the X-Pac role, where I'd be the workhorse of the group, you know what I mean? Okay. And then I had to tell him, like, I've already signed with Ring of Honor, blah 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 blah. And then once they heard that I left Ring of Honor, I'm pretty sure it was him and Terry Taylor that called Bill Behrens and was like, yeah, we want to do something.
Now, was there any likings from like Road Dogg and Billy Gunn who were like, all for it, for having you in that group?
Road Dogg and I became like real good friends while I was at TNA. And one day we were sitting in first class and we were both sitting next to each other, and he goes, hey man, they wanted you here months before, but me and Billy didn't know you, and so we said fuck no. So I understand, like, if they've never seen me wrestle, you know what I mean? Like, I would say that about somebody like joining the embassy too, you know what I mean? Like, just because like you're, like even like with my students, like, that's my seal of approval, they're using my name, you know what I mean? And so I just want, I would be the same way that they were, but no hard feelings,
Right. So by the time you get to TNA, obviously there's a lot of people, some people, but myself, remember you best for your time with Lance Archer, who was known as Lance Rock, and Christy Hemme, known as the Rock and Rave Infection. Whose idea was that to put you guys together and put that gimmick on you?
Okay, so remember how I said that they wanted me to come to a pay-per-view?
Right.
So that pay-per-view, the match that they wanted me in was a tag team battle royal. And I'm like, what? I'm not in a tag team. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's my first night there. And they're like, oh, we're putting you with Lance and Christy. But we did that. We were a group for like 3 months with no gimmick. You know what I mean? Like, and like one agent would tell me one thing, Vince Russo would tell me another thing. You know what I mean? And then the other part of that is, like, they were using me all the time, but they hadn't signed me to a contract like they said they were. And so I was like, we got to figure out something, or like they can just get rid of me. You know what I mean? And so do you remember Simon Diamond?
Oh yeah.
So his name's Pat Kinney. He's an agent there. And at the time, and he was really into 80s metal bands and stuff like that. And I saw Jeff Jarrett's kids playing Guitar Hero backstage, and I was like, hey man, like maybe we should do something with this. And he helped me formulate that gimmick, and then we pitched it to Jeff, and then it went off and running, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Now, I asked Chris Harris this question when he was on this show, about Vince Russo. Now, I'm not sure if you were specifically there at the time when Vince Russo was in TNA during like the early 2000s. I know you made some frequent appearances, but my question for you is, was there a lot of guys in the back that feared that, hey, Vince Russo's here, now he's doing, some of the bookings here for TNA? Was there a lot of fear or like reminiscing from guys who were in like WCW, like, oh shit, here he is about to fuck up another company?
Not that I knew, you know what I mean? Like, not that I could tell. Because like some of those guys are like real close to Vince, you know what I mean? Like,
right.
Like Steiner was close to Vince. Jeff is close to Vince. You know what I mean? Like, the guys that were sticking around for the most part were close to Vince, and yeah, I never got that vibe, and like my friends, the guys that I hung out with, like they would have some issues with some of the stuff that was going on, you know what I mean? Like AJ or Joe or Christopher Daniels, or you know what I mean, like those guys, and then the guys that I hung out with were mainly like the Motor City Machine Guns. P. Williams was my roommate the whole time I was there. Xavier Woods, Jay Lethal, Sanjay Dutt. Like that was my group. And like there would be some things that would happen that, there was one time that they wanted the Motor City Machine Guns to get color, like to blade themselves for a pre-tape. You know what I mean? Like they're not even going to be in front of fans. You know what I mean? And they're like, no, we're not doing that. You know what I mean? Like we can put fake blood on our heads. You know what I mean? And like, and they got taken off shows because they said no to that. And like that was something that Vince was really adamant about. And like, I could see where they were coming from, you know what I mean? But like, but but on the flip side, there's guys like myself or Petey Williams that would do anything if we're working for a company. We're real company guys, and we're the first ones that they fire. You know what I'm saying? Like, we're always saying yes, and that, we're the first ones let go.
Now, back in 2020, before the whole COVID pandemic hit, TNA, or Impact as they're called nowadays, they were supposed to have like a reunion show called No Place Like Home. Was there any thoughts, or was there anybody who was calling you who said, hey, we want you to come back to the show just for like one night?
No, I talk to PD on a pretty regular basis, but like there was nothing that they had called me for. Yeah, nothing like that.
Now, when it comes to wrestling, do you still keep up with like the current product? And is there any guys who seek your interest? Like, oh, this guy might be big someday, or I see a lot of yourself in this person.
Yeah, I mean, I keep up with everything. Like, I watch a lot of independent wrestling. I've got a crop of students that are out there right now that are, like, Jordan Oliver is one of my students. He just did that 2-hour match a couple weeks ago.
That's right. Yeah.
And so I'm watching all of his stuff. There's another kid named Griffin McCoy that's really good. That's one of my students. The girl that's on TNA, Layla Hirsch, she was one of my students. And then there's a lot of people that that I had interactions with, like the guys with Acclaim. They were always around when I was around, and like I would agent their matches or something like that. You know what I mean? So there's a lot of people that I still, care about and want to see them do well. But there's a lot of guys that are popping. Like, Anthony Henry and I had like some amazing matches, and he just signed with WWE. Priscilla Kelly just signed with WWE, and she was in the women's Dusty Rhodes thing, and she was one of my students. And so I still keep up with all of it, and there's a ton of people that I think are, that are real good right now that that WWE or AEW should pick up real quick.
Now, what is your relationship with guys like AJ Styles? Like I said earlier in the show, I mean, you guys traveled up and down the road together, whether it was independent shows. For him to finally make it to WWE, on a full-time basis in 2016, what's your relationship like? And, do you see him slowing down anytime soon? Because he still moves like he's in his 20s.
Oh, yeah. It's one of those things where, like, we'll get, like, a random text here and there, and then, but he's busy, you know what I'm saying? Like, and I knew that with my relationship with Punk, like, when he was up there. Like, I knew, like, I would see him when he was in town if, they had a minute, you know what I mean? Like, but I know they're busy. And, like, there's some guys that I talk to more than others in WWE, like Cedric Alexander. Like, I was one of his first matches, and like, so I keep in close contact with him. There's a lot of guys that that I keep in contact with, but like, guys like AJ and Samoa Joe, I know they're doing their thing, and like, when they want to reach out, they'll reach out. You know what I'm saying? Like, wrestling's like a real culture of, you'll go away for a while, and then you'll come back and you'll pick up like right where you left off. You know what I mean? Like nothing ever happened, And but yeah, I lived in Atlanta for most of my career, but now I'm in Philadelphia, and so like I run into people more often. I talk to Drew Gulak on a regular basis. I talk to there's a lot of these guys that I talk to on a regular basis.
Now, you talked about CM Punk. One of my favorite matches with you involving Punk was the steel cage match from the nowhere to high what was it, nowhere to run event in 2005. And this was like right before Punk had signed off with WWE. What is it like for somebody like Punk not wrestling anymore, and all these speculations of people thinking like, oh, the guy's going to return to wrestling after transitioning into a mediocre UFC career. Do you think he'll ever come back into wrestling, and at what cost?
Yeah, he's not gonna come back. I mean, like, Punk. Punk was super helpful in my career. Did a lot for me, and we were real close for a long time. And I remember when he was going through his contract negotiations right before that, that Money in the Bank pay-per-view, and they were in Chicago and everything. And he was like, dude, I'm done. Like, they don't treat me like a star, and, and like, he's somebody that is real stubborn, you know what I mean? Like,
right.
And he's also somebody that, like, if there's no gray area with him, he's real black and white. Like, either he's with you or he's not, you know what I mean? And luckily, he's always fucked with me. Like, we've always been cool. But, like, once he cuts people off, he's, that's how he goes. I don't see him ever coming back. He's very bullheaded like that.
Yeah. And I mean, it's unfortunate too, because you really got to look at the relationship that like him and Colt Cabana had, and then that basically just spiraled out of control.
Yeah, that's crazy. I never saw that happen. When I first met those guys, they really took care of me. Like, they saw that I was hustling the same way they were hustling, and like they took real good care of me. And it was always them two together. Like, I would stay at both of their houses when we'd be in Chicago. You know what I mean? Like, every time we were in Chicago, I would be with them after the show. You know what I mean? Like, but to see that happen, like, is real heartbreaking.
Right. So you ended up returning to Ring of Honor in 2009, after your first stint with TNA. Talk about the matches that you had with somebody like Necro Butcher, because I know you had a dog collar match, and his style of wrestling. I wasn't introduced to Necro Butcher till I seen the movie The Wrestler, which I'm pretty sure you're aware of, with Mickey Rourke. And, they were going through their match in the bag, oh, what about a staple gun? Take it through the nipples and putting dollar bills stapled to the head. What was it like, facing somebody of his caliber with such a, hardcore style of wrestling?
Yeah, I mean, like, keep in mind, like how I said early in my career, I would take unprotected chair shots, and I'm down to do that.
Right.
But over the years, I got to the point where, like, I would only do that if it's necessary. If it's, part of the storyline or something like that. You know what I mean? And so, like, when Necro and I were put together, he was somebody that really that I had fun wrestling with. You know what I mean? Like, he would rather hurt himself than his opponent. He was very selfless like that, and we had fun. Like, he was a good dude to be around, and we had him come to the 20th anniversary show for CZW and inducted him into the Hall of Fame, and so I got to reconnect with him last year, and just good dude. There was, I'd rather wrestle Necro Butcher than Brent Albright any day. You know what I mean? Like,
right.
So there was guys that were like more difficult to deal with than Necro.
Now, is there any plans or, rumor of you possibly getting inducted in the CZW Hall of Fame?
I'm sure it'll happen eventually somewhere, you know what I'm saying? Like, yeah, but I'm not, when all this happened, like I knew I was retiring from in-ring work, but like I don't want to, stop being around the business, but this has been a lot harder than I thought it would be, like emotionally too. Like
Right.
Jordan and Griffin both had matches a couple weeks ago. Like when Jordan did that 2 hour match, it was right down the street from my house, and I haven't gotten out of the house yet. You know what I mean? Like I have been too embarrassed to go anywhere, honestly, and it's just been dealing with doctors over and over. But like I haven't been around people, except for my girlfriend, and it's like I haven't even, like she's taken up, like she's a pro wrestler also, and she's taken over my classes at the school and, everything. Like it's just been super difficult to deal with. And I didn't think it would be that difficult to deal with mentally.
Right.
But, and just physically, like, it's hard to ask people for help. You know what I mean? Like I can't tie shoes anymore. I can't tie drawstrings on my pants anymore. You know what I'm saying? Like, some bottles are difficult for me to open, and
Yeah.
so it's just been like a way different than I thought it would be, and so I haven't even been at shows to even deal with that yet,
Right.
um, I still talk to people every day, like people reach out every day, but it just I just haven't gotten to where like I feel comfortable yet.
Now, I know before we got all this set up and everything, I made a contribution into helping you out with hopefully getting a prosthetic arm. Now, when that comes to be, once you get that arm and everything, do you think there can be a slight possibility, not a big chance, but maybe like a slight possibility of maybe saying, hey, one more match, maybe one little run? Because, like I said earlier, you had guys like Zach Gowen who were, in the business with one leg, and he even wrestled with the prosthetic leg at a couple occasions.
Yeah. I don't know, like I take too much pride in my work, you know what I mean? And like if I can't wrestle the way people remember how I was, I mean like these last few years I've like some of my matches have been like really, really good, you know what I mean? Like if you go on YouTube and look at my matches from Atlanta Wrestling Entertainment where I'm wrestling Cedric Alexander or Johnny Gargano or Tommaso Ciampa or David Starr or JT Dunn, like all these guys that were the it guys on the indies, before they got signed, or Anthony Henry, for example. I was, I was doing my thing, and like I don't want to be a shell of my former self. You know what I'm saying? Like, so I don't know, man. Like it would take a lot of like me thinking about it and training and stuff like that to figure out if that's what I want to do.
Right. Now, before we sign off here, was there anything that you wanted to promote? Anything that you wanted to advertise? So maybe people like your GoFundMe for the.
Yeah. If you want to contribute, like my GoFundMe is like www.gofundme.com/F/Jimmy Rave, and the the GoFundMe is like not just for the prosthetic arm, but like bills are starting to come in from the surgery. You know what I mean? Like, and just tons of stuff going on. So yeah, if you can contribute, that's awesome. I hate asking for help. Like it sucks, but I'm in like a weird position right now, and so yeah, if you can help out, that'd be awesome.
Well, man, I hope everything turns out great for you. I mean, you look to be in good spirit. I mean, despite your condition. But I want to thank everybody for tuning in to the Pro Wrestle Zone podcast. Jimmy, I want to thank you for tuning in and coming in as a guest. Be sure to check us out on all social media platforms. You can check us out on Facebook, YouTube, all streaming platforms, and be sure to hit that little bell notification on YouTube so that way you get all our episodes that are uploaded. Until next time, guys, this has been your host, Ian Beast 94. Until next time, sayonara.